Hello and welcome to the agenda. I am Ajay Kaul. Today we will talk about the US hardening its stand against China over Tibet issue. US President Donald Trump has signed into law a bill which prescribes that the successor to the Dalai Lama would be chosen by the Tibetan Buddhists themselves, and Chinese government should have no role in it. There is a provision for sanctions on Chinese officials if they try to appoint a new Dalai Lama. So is the US finally getting serious on ground over the Tibet issue? We will discuss this in the agenda today. We have with us retired diplomat Vishnu Prakash. To give us the Tibetan perspective, we have President of Tibetan Youth Congress, Gonpo Dundup. But before we start our conversation, let's have a look at this small report.
Just weeks before he leaves office, US President Donald Trump has signed into law a bill which warns China against appointing the next Dalai Lama. The new law prescribes that the successor to the current 14th Dalai Lama would be chosen solely by the Tibetan Buddhists, and sanctions would be imposed on Chinese Communist Party and officials if they try to interfere or appoint a new Dalai Lama. The bill was unanimously passed by the US Senate last week despite China's protest. China views the 14th Dalai Lama, who lives in exile in India, as a separatist working to split Tibet from China. The new law authorizes assistance to non-governmental organizations in support of Tibetan communities in Tibet. It also authorizes the offices of the U.S. Special Coordinator for Tibetan Studies and expands the office's duties to include additional tasks such as pursuing international coalitions to ensure that the next is appointed solely by the Tibetan Buddhist faith community. The move has angered China, which terms it as interference in its internal matters. Bureau Report.
Now let's welcome our guests, Ambassador Vishnu Prakash and Gonpo Dundup. Welcome to the program, both of you. So,
thank you.
Let me first go to Mr. Dundup. How do you see the US enforcing and enacting a new law on which talks tough on Tibet issue against China?
Yes, firstly, I'd like to say thank you for having me to discuss this important legislation state. So this is a very momentous, important and significant legislation which is adopted by the this legislation message to Tibetan people who is not the British rule. Not only that, it sends a message to the communist government that Tibet is still alive and a serious issue. So this is a very significant momentous. All the Tibetans are enjoying welcome momentous. Yes.
Okay, let me go to Ambassador Prakash. Since you are an old China hand, so do you think US is now finally getting serious on the Tibet issue?
Well, when it comes to big powers, there is nothing final about it. It depends on how the relationship is between USA and China, and there have been times when His Holiness the Dalai Lama has been, for example, received at the White House. At times, they have found it difficult. At times, very rarely he is received in the Oval Office. At times, the U.S. President drops in. By the way, President-elect Biden has also said that he will be receiving His Holiness. So it all depends on the relationship and the strategic considerations, and that is what big powers do. But at the moment, given the relationship, given the fact that China has tried to upstage the US, these steps have been taken. It all hinges on the attitude of the incoming president,
Right.
And what actually the US does, whether they walk the talk or it's symbolic, also what is going to be important is how the other countries look at it. Given, there has never been or rarely been such an unfavorable opinion of the China all over the world. And if other nations follow suit, it will bring pressure on China.
Right. Mr. Dundup, you heard Ambassador Prakash saying that governments, foreign powers, have their own interests and assessments. So, as he talked about, His Holiness has been received at the White House, and sometimes it has been hidden, and sometimes it has been exposed. And particularly, if we talk about Trump administration, has been kind of hard on China. Now, Biden administration is coming in. So, do you think that the new administration will walk the talk, or they will implement what has been enacted?
So yes, United States is officially supporting the Tibetan cause for a long back. If you look at the history, in 2007, His Holiness the Dalai Lama is ever as the highest civil death ever by the United States. And just now, the former ambassador has already mentioned that from time and again, His Holiness the Dalai Lama is officially received as the state guest by the United States. The current 2020 Tibet Policy and Support Act is a very momentous. The reason is this is now the law of the United States to officially support the reincarnation of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, which is accepted and recognized by the current 14th Dalai Lama and the Tibetan Buddhism. So the United States has made a clear decision that they are going to sanction and they are going to punish the communist government if they enthrone or select the 15th Dalai Lama with their own choice. So this is a very significant in this new legislation. Apart from that, they have officially recognized the Central Tibet administration as an elected governing the exiled government.
Yeah, Mr. Dondup, I was coming to that. While
Sure.
while the U.S. government has been receiving the Holiness, they have recognized for the first time the Central Tibetan government in exile by receiving the president recently. Isn't it that a change?
Yeah, this is a good change. So the current CCOM, our president of Central Tibet administration, is officially received in a White House. It's a very huge achievement. And second thing, in this new legislation, they clearly demarcated, they clearly said that the United States government is officially going to accept the Central Tibet administration as an elected governing body of exiled people and who represent the Tibetans inside Tibet. So this is a very huge achievement.
Okay, Ambassador Vishnu Prakash, if we talk about the Indian government has been kind of reticent in the recent years on the Tibetan issue. Do you agree with that?
Not at all. Absolutely not. India's position has been very consistent. We have received His Holiness with the greatest respect and affection. His Holiness has been has been mentioning that India is his second home. There are more than 200,000 Tibetan friends of ours who are in India. India does not just talk. India walks the talk. And we all know that this has come at a huge political cost. Nevertheless, India is very clear that His Holiness is a revered spiritual. And we are very happy that India is his home.
No, I'll explain why I asked that question. It's like China has been saying that Indian government will not allow any political activity by the Dalai Lama or the central government, Tibetan government in exile. And we have been kind of agreeing and implementing that. Am I right?
Well, that has been the understanding from day one, Ajay.
Yeah.
That, His Holiness is a spiritual leader, he is a revered leader, and political activities will not be conducted from the Indian soil. And that is something that His Holiness and our Tibetan friends they have been as responsive to India's sensitivities as we have been responsive to theirs.
Okay, let me ask Mr. Dondup about the same position that India has been holding. So, do you want that? Do you think that India should now change this position since China is not adhering to any agreements with India?
So Ajayji, we the Tibetan people are indebted with the support and solidarity for last 6 decades shown by the government and the people of India. So we have a feeling, especially those exiled Tibetans who are residing in India, we have a feeling of home away from home. And even our root guru, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, always says that he is the son of India. So in terms of settlement and the rehabilitation, we were indebted, we were very much thankful for the government of India. But our expectation is much higher. So we want government of India to act a more concrete policy to tackle the Chinese intrusion, to challenge the Chinese imperialism. So Tibetan Youth Congress, as the largest non-government organization in exiled Tibetan community, for last 5 decades, we are seeking the support from people of India and government of India for the independence of Tibet. So we have a proper slogan that Tibet ka azadi, Bharat ka suraksha. So once the Tibet become independent, then there will be no kind of territorial dispute. There will be a peaceful coexistence zone from Ladakh to Arunachal Pradesh, all the Himalayan regions. So what we want is, as the ambassador, CCC.
You talked about much higher expectation. What are these higher expectations? Can you please elaborate on this?
Yeah, as before our ambassador Vishnuji have mentioned that now many of the European and the India especially have to follow suit the legislation which is adopted by the United States. Now India has to bring a more kind of concrete policy on Tibet, and India has to consider Tibet as a core issue while dealing with China. So we are expecting from the government level to support the Tibet independence cause.
Okay, Ambassador Vishnu Prakash, you heard what Mr. Dondup is saying. What do you say on this?
Yes, we have the greatest admiration for our friends, our brothers and sisters from Tibet. They have suffered a lot. They have made the arduous journey across. There is a kind of persecution that they have been facing for the last, since 1950s, that is almost 70 years, which is unprecedented. Yet, their determination to have Tibet as their homeland remains absolutely intact. So we have the greatest admiration. At the same time, what China is capable of, the sinicization of Tibet that is happening, the way a new Panchen Lama who was
appointed.
Not appointed. His Holiness had identified the Panchen Lama. He has been removed. There is a Chinese appointed Panchen Lama about whom he is being kept in captivity. We know what happened to Karmapas. So, and we have a long border with China. There are lots of difficulties which my learned friend is aware of. So, India has to be careful. India has also to make sure that the national interests are protected, safe. Therefore we have made it very clear that our sympathies, our support for the Tibetan cause, for our Tibetan friends is unparalleled. And we are not doing any favor to our Tibetan friends. So don't get me wrong. I mean, they deserve what they are asking for. But at the same time, we need to calibrate. We have to be careful. We have to be mindful. Other countries are also doing their bit, but I would still like to believe and say that India's support is unparalleled because we believe in what the Tibetans stand for. We believe for the religious freedoms, we believe in their rights, and we are walking the talk as perhaps no other country has.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the other countries have a role, but I guess India has the biggest role because we are the neighbors, and we are not as vocal as we used to be earlier, maybe before 2003, when we it was a quid pro quo in the context of Sikkim. So after that, we have silenced down. Am I right? Ambassador
Is this
Prakash.
question to me?
Yeah, Ambassador Prakash.
Yeah.
Please.
No, I don't agree with that characterization. One does not have to go to the rooftops to say anything. I mean, in diplomacy, a lot is said, a lot is unsaid. But what India stands
But
for
that is perceived like India gave up the Tibet cause in 2003 in lieu of Sikkim. That is the perception.
well, if somebody perceives it that way, I think he or she has to perceive it. My understanding, I'm not as learned as those who perceive it in one way, but from my very little understanding of the situation, I am very convinced that India's commitment to the Tibetan cause is unparalleled. I will challenge anybody, any country, any nation, anybody to say or to prove it otherwise. But we are not in that game. We believe in the Tibetan cause, and that is why the Tibetans have India as their second home. That is what I have to say.
Okay, Mr. Dhundup, do you agree with that perception that India has almost given up that Tibet cause politically since 2003 after in lieu of Sikkim, as the question I asked Ambassador Prakash?
So now we can't look at the history. In the history, there is a different kind of, sometimes we made a mistake or sometimes we have a kind of good kind of mistake. So what we have to take is what we can do better in the future.
But you
If
learn from,
India-
but we had to learn
Yeah,
from
we have
mistakes.
to learn.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
yes,
was
no,
it a
yeah,
mistake?
We have to learn from. So the first mistake is to having a close relation and believing the Chinese Communist Party, the Panchil Agreement and the Hindi-Chini Bye-Bye. So we are saying that if the India back then supported the Tibet independence in 1960, now there will be no kind of territorial dispute.
Right.
Tibet will act as a buffer zone. Now, if you look at the Chinese current expansionist policy, they are creating trouble in all the Himalayan belts, from Ladakh to Arunachal Pradesh. If you look at the business in terms of economy, they are challenging the Indian market and try to manipulate whole India market system. So now it's an honest and important time, high time, for India to take a strict action. So now we have to take a stepwise. Isolate the Chinese Communist Party, means keep the social distance, political distance, and culturally also we can keep the Chinese from the distance. So that's how we can make the China accountable for their expansionist policy, for all their misconduct, and for their misery, the death and destruction.
So you
So
talked
if
about.
you look at the current
Yeah,
cases, now the communist government recently blamed the origin of this pandemic, the Chinese virus. They blame that it causes it from India. So this kind of government is the Chinese Communist government. So we have to make them accountable by taking the strict policy, by taking the strict steps from individual till the government level. So as I mentioned earlier, the expectations that we have to the government of India is more than the rehabilitation. So in terms of politically, we need the strong support. In the policy also, now the government of India should award His Holiness the Dalai Lama as a Bharat Ratna, means the highest civilian award. He is the #1 brand ambassador of India in all the foreign soil.
It's a very good suggestion, but you talked about India should be strict with China. What kind of strictness do you expect?
The strict means India should impose all the possible sanctions. Means in terms of economy,
India has already taken a lot of steps.
That we very much welcome. That we very much welcome and appreciate by banning all the Chinese apps. So now on the individual level, now the Indian masses are aware of the Chinese government and they are boycotting the Chinese products. This all from the individual till the government level. There should be an initiative and there should be the kind of joint campaign, and which we very much appreciate.
Okay. Ambassador Prakash, as Mr. Donduk just mentioned about, and we also know that earlier it was, as he talked about, it was a buffer zone. It could have been a buffer zone. Earlier it used to be called an Indo-Tibet border. Now it is called India-China border. So that is also a strategic change. I mean, now which is hurting us strategically maybe, or impacting, not hurting. Yeah.
Well, first of all, Mr. Dundup is a dear guest of India. I know that what he's saying out of affection for India, because normally anybody else being prescriptive and telling a host country what to do would have been taken amiss and
No,
seen as interference.
he's expressing his expectations.
Yes, and I'm expressing my viewpoint.
Yeah.
So his expectations, he has a right to.
Right.
My viewpoint, I have a right to.
And my my right is to host it. I mean, moderate.
No. We are all exercising our rights. It's a free country, and
Please.
I absolutely appreciate that. What I'm trying to say is that India is a very small country of 1.35 billion people. And we perhaps have some understanding of geopolitics, of real politics. We are also responsible for, the well-being of the nation. And we will do what is in the national interest.
Right.
At the same time, continuing with our affection and warmth for the wonderful Tibetan people. So that is the point that I would like to make here, and that goes part of any matter that we are discussing.
Okay, Mr. Dundup, you wanted to say something, I guess.
So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, so we are indebted with the affection and the warmth which is, and the solidarity and the support which is shown by the government and the people of India. We were very much thankful and indebted with that. But our expectation, India as the second most populous country and the leading democratic nation, and with all the kind of resources, if you look at the India own national interest, these days India have to focus more on the Himalayan region. The immediate threat to the Indian security is the China. In the Indian Parliament also, in the history, the Jayaprakash Narayan and the George Fernandez, the former defense minister, many have been highlighted that issue in the Indian Parliament also. India has to focus on the Chinese-centric and the focus on the Tibet issue. So our expectation is much higher than the affection and the one. So we were very much indebted. There's no question. There's no question with the Indian support and the solidarity, but we are expecting more. We want the government of India to have a more concrete and a strong kind of policy to challenge the Chinese expansionist policy and to make the China accountable.
Can I ask a question to my dear friend?
Sure, sir.
Can
sure.
I do that?
Sure, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Dundo, I know what you're saying about the threat perception, about the discussions in Parliament. And I would recognize that you have a right to your expectations, your aspirations. That is your right. Now, my simple question is, do you think that the decision makers in India are naive about the security concerns, or they do not know the reality, they don't know the extent of challenge? Would they have more information at their command, or would you have more information, with all due respect?
No, I'm not saying that I have more information, but we have the experience. We are the experience of the Chinese expansionist policy per se. And the second thing that we know what kind of the government is. So it's our earnest responsibility to highlight and to make the Chinese, our Indian public and the policy maker aware of what kind of communist government is, what kind of threat our India is going to face if they are not counter the China on time.
But
Oh, absolutely right. There is a reality. China's true face is known to everybody.
Right.
China's capability, China is one merit power which has picked up quarrels with everybody. Their expansionist agenda, their territorial ambition, their arm twisting, their military muscle, their economic deep pockets, how they're using is very well known. But at the same time, given their size, given their capabilities of hopefully doing the right thing, and generally what they're doing now, their expansionism and aggression, is something that the world knows. But
Right.
there are, it is, there is nothing black and white in real life. There are shades of gray, and every country has to take into account a variety of considerations before coming to a conclusion. Nothing is written in stone. Things evolve, relationships evolve, positions evolve. So that is what India is doing as one of the biggest countries in the world. So are the others. And similar, by the same token, you have a right, when I say you, our Tibetan friends have a right to look at things from their perspective, hopefully remaining peaceful as His Holiness the Dalai Lama preaches India, Indians, the Tibetans, and the rest of the world, because at the end of the day, that is the way to move forward.
Right. Mr. Dundup, I'll also add here, you talked about that government should have a concrete policy. I guess the Indian government has a concrete policy. Maybe your expectations are more. But there has also been a suggestion, there was recently a suggestion that maybe India should raise a Tibetan regiment in the wake of Ladakh aggression. So, Mr. Dundup, how do you find that suggestion?
Yeah, so not only the concrete, I'm saying that the strong policy should be there. So the Tibet independent is India's security, as I mentioned earlier. So now the government of India should support the Tibet independent movement. So once the Tibet becomes an independent state, so that will be a directly linked with the India geopolitics, India national security at large.
But don't you think that India is supporting your independence movement, or maybe you are right?
So on the policy level, the India is accepting the one China policy on the official ground. And whenever there is a Chinese delegation from the government level, we can't organize the anti-China, the kind of campaign activity in Indian soil. So there's a lot like this, there's a many kind of issues there. So what we want is India should fully support with the policy by adopting a new legislation like the United States. Through the policy and the political ground, India should have a stronger stance to support the Tibet independence and Tibet just cause at large.
Maybe Ambassador Prakash can maybe respond to that. Can you?
I have very clearly articulated my position.
Okay.
My position and my understanding is what I have already conveyed. At the same time, as I said, I think our friend has a right to his ambitions, his aspirations, and we always wish our Tibetan friends all the very best.
Okay, Ambassador Prakash, one more thing. As you mentioned
Thank
about various governments taking their positions. Now everybody thought that China is now isolated because of Wuhan and other issues and all that. But now I have read the latest report that EU, European Union, is going to sign a big trade deal with China. We should talk about investments in China. So how do you see that?
No, I have always maintained, and my opinion is in the public domain, so there is nothing secret about it, that the unfavorable rating opinion of China is at the moment at the highest level. One has rarely seen so much of unfavorable opinion about China, and reasons we don't have to get into. We all know the reasons. At the same time, every country wants to engage with China. No country wants to choose between US, I'm just saying US, but between US and China. Even all the neighboring countries of China and beyond, they're hedging their bets. China is the second largest economy. There are certain realities. There are,
Why I pointed out about European Union is like it's a block of 27 countries, and there have been issues like forced labor in China, in Tibet and Xinjiang province also. So despite those concerns, which are known all over the world, EU is going ahead with signing a deal. That is the context I am asking.
Absolutely. As I said, there is nothing in black and white in the real world. There are shades of gray. You articulate your concerns and you pursue your interests. And European Union, I don't want to point fingers at European Union, but every country will follow its economic interests, political interests, security interests, and other interests that they have, including human rights considerations. So it has to be a balance. It is generally a balance. Doesn't have to be in an ideal world. You will say either this or that. I come across, and I've turned 64, that it is either that or this or that. I mean, it is this and that, and also that, and many others. That's how the diplomacy and the world functions.
Yeah, we are running out of time. So before we conclude, one last question to Mr. Dundu. As you heard Ambassador Prakash, this is not an ideal world. So in this unideal world, how difficult is your struggle?
No, for the all struggles, we the Tibetan people, especially outside the Tibet, using all the freedom and independence, we are raising the voice of innocent voice of the Tibetan people who is suffering under the brutal Chinese rule. As Ambassador already mentioned, that every country wants to make a good relation with China. This is not so very true after this pandemic. Now, many of the countries have started agreeing and raising the caution and their doubt against the origin of this virus, first thing. And second thing, many of countries, the small countries, are aware of Chinese debt tax. So that China will first give a loan at a very low interest. And second, if they can't pay, they will have more power, the upper hand in their own property. And the second thing is the Chinese property are cheap because of the forceful labor of the Tibetan and the Uyghurs. And they are extracting all the minerals with the free of cost from the Tibet. So with all these cases, the Chinese products are cheap, and the kind of people have been relying on the Chinese products till now. So what we the Tibetan want is, we are struggling for the independence of Tibet for last many decades. Now, whatever the power they have, whatever the veto power, political power, or the economic power they have, we will continue to struggle and resist until and unless we restore our own independent Tibet soil. This is a very loud and clear. Yes.
So Tibetans will continue to raise their voice as much as they can and fight for freedom. But my time is up for this program. Thank you both of you for participating in the debate.
Pleasure and all the very best.
Thank you, sir. This is all in the agenda today. Thanks for watching. I'll be back with another important topic tomorrow. Till then, goodbye.